kind of give us just a little of your background, kind of
Sure.
your bio before we get into our questions. If you, just, where
Well,
you come from,
I don't necessarily like reading to people, but I kind of just brought a little bio sheet I can hand y'all and hit the highlights, and you can review it at your leisure. But basically, I was raised in Hendersonville and went to high school here, Hendersonville High School, joined the military, lived many places nationally and internationally. And one of those, after 12 years, I realized Sumner County was a pretty good place to be from. So moved back here, married my wife, and we've lived in Hendersonville for about 20 years. And my kids have been raised here in Sumner County as well. As far as my personal qualifications, 12 years in the military, multiple peacetime and combat deployments, leadership positions which required me to manage many people and actually many country assets that were used at the same time. So I had to be kind of multi-versed in what was going on both with us and with the countries we were in at the time. And in that role, it required me to do and submit and maintain operating budgets. Right now, I'm an attorney in Tennessee, licensed in Tennessee for about 16 years. 7 of those most recent years, I've had my own practice in Hendersonville, supervising 6 paralegals and assistants. And prior to that, I was partnered up with the guy that brought me on when I graduated from law school. We partnered up and started a business in Madison, and did that for several years before going solo, and we managed it up to about 20 paralegals, support staff, etc. I am admitted in Tennessee in the federal courts in all the districts of this state. I'm also a Rule 31 listed civil mediator. I've advised and represented clients in any number of things from real estate development, business formations and governance, homeowners association formations, management, drafting, negotiating, enforcing leases. Actually have quite a bit of landlord-tenant experience, both practicing and in implementing laws and legislation. I did some lobbying both statewide and nationally for some Landlord-Tenant Act revisions. And I do quite a bit of bankruptcy creditor filing and litigation as well. I am allowed to practice in all the districts of Tennessee for federal courts as well. Prior to going to law school, my undergraduate degree was in biology, where I worked with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation for several years. While with them, I had the opportunity as a biologist to inspect water systems, to include new and existing plants, water main construction, maintenance, and making sure all the operations are in compliance with state and federal laws. We operate under the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is federally mandated, but the state has adopted its own set of laws that mirror that. I find this to be relevant in that I've had quite a bit of involvement in new construction, residential, commercial development impacts, the infrastructure, not only during initial construction, but future impact, maintenance, expenses, etc. But basically, just to conclude a little opening statement here, I feel I'm an analytical, energetic, trustworthy, detail-oriented attorney. I pride myself on being professionally apolitical, and I'm a firm believer in the ethical canons I work under, and that they're basically the gold standard of my profession. I take that very seriously. I've been offered in-house counsel work before, which I kind of relate this to because I'm dedicated to the county if in fact I were doing this, and I didn't do it because I didn't want to give up the freedom of running my own business. But the opportunity to work for this county, which my family and I truly love, I feel like gives me the opportunity not only to continue on in the profession I love, but to get some sort of self-gratification out of it as well, to feel like I've played a part in both my job, my profession, my way of life, and hopefully keep my kids around so that they'll bring their kids when when the time comes. My wife's hoping that's sooner rather than later. I feel like I'd bring a fresh set of eyes for legal matters and queries. My sole purpose would be advocating on behalf of the county, mayor, and the commission's wishes in compliance with all the applicable laws and absent any personal bias or undue influence. And that's the main reason I'm asking for your consideration to be the county law director.
Okay.
But that was a quick snapshot into my life. I will entertain any questions
Yeah,
that you have for
some.
me.
We'll go for it. Craig, you want to start?
We're going to start with questions.
Yep.
I'll go ahead and start. Are you aware of and prepared for meetings outside regular business hours? Do you plan on making most of these meetings yourself or sending a representative from office?
Yeah, yes, I don't see a problem with any of that because my youngest is a junior in high school, and I think this would be a good opportunity for me to be able to do those kind of meetings and whatnot, because I really don't have any obligations as far as sports or family stuff other than hunting for a college for my daughter.
So the answer is yourself. You will do
Oh,
it.
yeah,
Yes,
I will
yes.
do as much of it myself as possible.
Okay.
Well, I think you answered question 2 in your opening statement, so I'm going to skip around just a little bit. I'm going to take Shannon's question. We'll see if I can ask this correctly.
Everybody gets a shot at it.
I think the gist of this question is, in any instance, just because it may be legal to do something, or just because you can, does that mean you should?
I've got two ways to answer that, and I tend to run into this a lot when people have asked me questions about my interest in doing this. One is my personal beliefs versus it's the classic attorney question. What's your opinion on this? Well, which side are you paying me to defend? But personally, I have, that's an ethics issue to me. If you're doing it to navigate some stream so that you can technically not lie, but if I'm understanding your question correctly, technically not lie, but there's maybe some malfeasance there. If I were to interpret that way, I would strongly suggest against it. I guess I would be better with some sort of fact-based example, just some made-up event, and better understand what it is you want. As far as it's just, if the law says you can do it, I can't tell you not to do it. If it's not unethical, I can't tell you not to do it. But if it serves some purpose and it is legal, then I'll do anything I can to advocate your ability to do those things. That would be the most generic way I could answer that question.
I am pleased with that answer. That was
Just
my
for the
question.
record, it wasn't my question. I
Okay.
was just trying to,
It was
we
not
was just
my
trying to
question,
ask.
but it was,
okay.
Yeah.
yes, it's been a joke. It's been
Well, it's worded a little different than that too, but
Yes.
it would come across the right way.
Yes.
So.
Okay. All right. Oh, it's my turn. Okay. I'll ask another one of my questions. Oh wait, research. In your current practice, well, you mostly answered that too. You have 6 paralegals and you've managed many other paralegals, but how in this job it's so multidisciplinary. How do you plan on doing your research, and are you comfortable with the multiple types of research you will have to do?
No, I welcome the research. That's one of the parts of it I do kind of miss, because much like a doctor in medicine, you kind of get into your niche and then that ends up being all you do. So you become very well versed in that one area of law, but I just don't have the time to research other stuff due to my obligations to my clients. On to take that analogy a little further, I also understand, and I'm a big believer in, I will talk to my clients. I won't even bill people on initial consultations because I want to know what the facts are first. Because if I can't help them out, or if I feel like I can take them halfway through but they got to switch horses midstream, I'm not going to do that to my client. It's not worth the money. So much like a doctor would send you to a specialist, I as an attorney will tell you, look, we're getting out of the scope of what I can do, but as long as I've been practicing, I've got a pretty good Rolodex. I guess that's an antiquated term now, but I've got a pretty good Rolodex, and I'll say, this is the guy you need to talk to, and instead of paying me to turn around and kick you to him, let's just let the guy that's going to finish this start it, because I don't want to be responsible for messing something up. So that's how I would view this, is to handle what I can, to research what needs to be researched, to see where special attorneys need to come in that have a certain niche to fill something, because it will probably be more cost effective at the end of the day, even though it may not look like that on the front end, to go ahead and get this person on board now. But as far as the research aspect of it in the prosecution, or I say prosecution in a furtherance kind of way, to advocate your claim or position, I will do as much of that as possible without exceeding my ethical duties of not being able to fully represent a certain area. I'll give you a good example I run into a lot is the ADA when it comes to fair housing discrimination cases. I won't take those because they so easily land in the lap of a federal court, and all people see are attorney's fees tied to it, and that's what the other side is generally trying to get. I deal with the landlord side of that aspect, and I've got person that I send them right to, and I say, we're kicking off this fair housing claim. You take it from here, and I'll pick up the pieces and do what I need to do on the back end once it's resolved. That was a long-winded answer, and I hope it answered the question that was asked. I tend to see shiny things and get outside of the scope what I'm talking about, but is there any further questions on that, or somebody want to redirect me?
Do you?
No, so.
We sometimes have to hire, they currently do hire outside litigators in the office, but I just wondered how you do your research, and yes, so you answered that question.
Yes.
Yes.
But basically, I mean, you do your own research. Question, I guess, was in your current practice, who's been your primary researcher? So it sounds like you have been.
I have been, because I don't know what questions to ask unless I know what it is I'm dealing with. So I will dive in just to understand the scope of what it is I'm dealing with.
But you're comfortable with knowing that, hey, I've researched this, and but when it comes to the practical application of executing something, that knowing like we need to bring in an expert for this because that's going to be the most cost efficient and best way to handle this for the county, or
much more succinctly than I put it. Yes.
Okay. I was just kind of summarizing that up, so that answers my question.
It's not often people want to listen to what I do for a living either, so I'm a little excited about that.
I'll go back. I'm gonna page 3, question number 3. Page 1, question number 3. What is your opinion on the county mayor's or the county commission's authority to enact or enforce mask mandates in public?
I'd done a little bit of research when this whole COVID thing kicked off, and I find that language to be very vague, and to me, everything falls in the governor's lap, and then you get into the vague area of who he can appoint as a designee to enforce mandates, what agencies have to be involved before they do that. I believe at a state level that needs to be changed altogether. But as things stand now, it would solely be dictated by what the governor put into play as far as enforcement of his orders and who he gave authority to. We got a situation where people are giving regulations and ordinances when they have no medical background or reason to do that. So I've got an issue with it personally.
So, but would you, I guess, do you feel that the county mayors had authority to enact mask mandates, I guess, under emergency power statute or under the Constitution?
I still didn't see a clear shot on that when I was researching it. I saw where it was with the governor, and I saw then we started getting to these caveats about who he could appoint, but I cannot sit here and safely say without putting some considerable research into it that mayors beyond the governor's authority could do that.
Did you feel that the governor had the authority to delegate that to county mayors?
I don't think I think the delegation starts with, actually, that all fell under the, TEMA. And through executive order, and then TEMA comes in. I just can't find a straight line to the mayors or whether they be county or city.
Gotcha. So you just basically can't see any kind of authority, that any justification for that kind of authority to be.
Not a straight line. But there would be some legal maneuvering to show justification, I think, and it would be ripe for suit.
Okay.
We'll change gears just a little. What experience do you have with governmental meeting procedures and protocols?
I do a fair amount of business entity formations, small businesses, corporations, LLCs, and stuff like that. As part of the formation, I try to bring my clients in, especially when it's going to be multiple owners, and try to introduce them to things like rules of order, things like that, and set up a mechanism for them to follow these rules. It's one of those classic examples of I can tell them what to do, whether the doctor tells you not to smoke, it's up to you whether you smoke or not, and whether they actually implement these rules. But I do have follow-up consultations where they can't agree on anything, then I've got to reintroduce, like Robert's Rules of Order or something like that, and say, look, y'all need to try to incorporate this so that you've got some method and mechanism. So as far as my involvement with those rules, I do try to implement them in business formations and homeowners associations. I do a lot of homeowners association work too, where I find myself on boards or at board meetings, and I've got to remind them that we're operating under these rules and that we need to stick to these procedures. So I am familiar enough with it to operate under it. I just don't daily deal with it.
Everybody good with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm gonna circle back, since it's still fresh. I'm gonna take question 9. I think you stated that the power rested solely with the governor, and that you didn't see a straight line down to the mayor. So this question is kind of a follow-up to that. With the recent COVID pandemic, do you believe that the governor acted within his powers under the state constitution to close public access to businesses he deemed non-essential?
I think he overexceeded. And my biggest concern with that, and I dealt with that actually quite regularly with the interference of contracts and some of my landlord-tenant practices. They were trying to stop evictions. They were trying to tell landlords what they could and could not do. And my argument was always, you don't have privity of contract here. A court can't come in and modify and do this. And it took about 1.5 years, but finally Memphis jumped on board and said, you're absolutely right, this stops now. And then we were able to start pursuing our evictions that some of my clients had, because we finally got a court to side with us and say exactly that, no privity of contract.
So basically, it's acknowledging that. Would you say that the governor doing that violated contracts of businesses?
Yeah, I think he exceeded his scope of authority. And
Yeah, I mean, because when you said that, our Constitution, our state Constitution, it says No retrospective law or law impairing the obligations of the contract shall be made. It's Article 1, Section 20. So just based on that alone, it seems that everything was done unconstitutional on that, based on a violation of contracts, just that switch one article.
You just
So, I mean, that's-
straight up interference, yes.
I appreciate you saying that and understanding that contract law is helpful, so. Any other questions without a follow-up?
No good. I'm gonna ask your question. May I? Mark? Since I wrote it down. Here it is. So in your private practice, when a client ignored your advice, how do you handle that? So you say, this is what I think you should do, this is what the law says. Now, how do you handle that?
If what they're asking me to do is still within the scope of the law, I will explain to them that you're on the side of a losing case, but if you want to continue to pay me to bring you negative results, that's what we will do, or you can go find another attorney. If I think they're trying to get me to operate outside of the law, I'll drop them. I'll drop them right then. And I'll let anybody know who I think they go to, be on the lookout. Or if they're just constantly coming to me with that, but they're still operating within the law, sometimes I'll price them up to make the nuisance value worth it as a client. But usually I'm a straight shooter on that, because I'm not going to spend a bunch of my time trying to prosecute and advocate a case, because I also have an image to protect in the courts as well. And if I'm known for bringing frivolous cases all the time, that's going to speak volumes in front of judges and court staff and clerks. So I just drop them.
Are you satisfied with that answer? Okay. Well, can I do the follow-up to that?
Sure.
Or was that?
No.
No,
I wanna
okay,
ask
I can't. Oh, no, he gets to ask a question.
Over with you. Let's see. What is your opinion on placing a moratorium on high-density residential building permits in the county if the county is unable to afford building new schools without a tax increase?
That would be the county's position. I would be there to advocate whichever position the county was wanting to take on the moratorium. If they're trying to put one in play, I say I'm going to research that and I'm going to find everything I can to make that happen. What I'm starting to notice, and I really didn't pay attention to it until this opportunity came up, I'm amazed at what we call population bracketing in the state, and how this rule applies to everybody but County X. Well, why is County X better than County Y? So whenever the population bracketing happens, I find that is a perfect starting point, because then other people have to explain why they're different. And then that's where you start to get traction in trying to move your position along too. Well, why can't I do the same thing? I didn't mean to go outside the scope of your question, but
No, I
that
think
just...
that's within the scope of the question.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I
Mhm.
mean, that's definitely within the scope of the question, in my opinion. As far as that bracketing, like if you see something that one county is exempt from and then the other counties are experiencing the same problem, how can you justify not allowing that county to use the same mechanisms that another county is using to solve the same problem? Like, why is there a
The state
bias?
loves population bracketing so that I guess state legislatures can make their constituents happy. About all I can figure.
So do you have, I guess, basically just, it's whatever the county commission, I guess, feels that they need to do or research. down that.
Exactly, because I would be operating under the assumption that you all know more about what you're trying to accomplish than I do. So what can I do legally to get you there?
All right. Another soft question here. Let's see if what is your opinion on the sheriff's authority to enact or ignore red flag laws passed by the state legislature?
I'm always going to attempt to advise that if this is what the law says, so this is what they're expecting. in the red flag situation, and I think that's an apropos name because the mere legality of it is a problem. If there's something to hang your hat on to say that this is not good law and the county was comfortable with that, I think I would support any efforts to take whichever side the county wants, basically. Me personally, I've got a big problem with the red flag laws. So if somebody's going to step up and say, we refuse to enforce this because we don't think it's legal, and I've seen that, then I don't have a problem with pressing those issues and pushing them to some better resolution and put it back on the legislatures to clean this mess up, because there's a whole bunch of constitutional issues with these red flag laws, and this is the slippery slope we hear about in law school all the time. You start here, and I don't know where this stuff's going to end up. So I would support any county, if it was this county saying, here's what we think, we don't think it's good law, and not only do I not agree with you, or do I agree with you, I think if you're willing to take the position, I just got to know, hey, this may be a pocketbook issue. Just be prepared to open up the checkbook, because it's going to take some litigation. I hope that answered it.
That's right. I think we went through all of our questions. We have 5 minutes if you want to ask another one.
Just, is there any questions you feel like we should ask or we should know about you to help us make this decision?
I'm fascinated with myself at the fact I'm interested in this, because I really didn't get too involved in the community. It's an easy cop-out, raising kids and really not paying attention. It's easy to bury your head in the sand and stuff. And then as I've been watching the past couple of years, I thought, I really don't like the way things are going nationally. And then I think, well, it's got to start somewhere. So yeah, county's the perfect place. And I'm not a political guy. I wouldn't be using this to advance myself politically anywhere. So my purpose for my self-fulfillment is to just know that I'm there to help with anybody that wants to keep and improve this county, the county I grew up in and know and love. Then that's what I want out of this. So, and I will say, who brought up the Robert's Rules? Was that you? I happen to be carrying this around. Whenever I form up a business, I'll give my clients one of these. I said, read this and get back with me on any questions. It's a little cheat sheet for it that they sell, I think, at Books A Million or Barnes & Noble. And anyway, I thought that was interesting.
Could I ask something?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned about the opening up the checkbook.
Mm-hmm.
And this just kind of came to my mind, but at what point would you advise the commission that we are maybe going down too far down the road where we may be overburdening the taxpayer?
I would try to, on the initial research on this, I would want that to be a question that we're talking about on the front end and halfway through it, because you've already spent money. So with my clients, especially when they're ones where it's a pocketbook versus principal situation, and I'm telling them, look, you're right, but how much do you want to pay to be right? I try to have all that together at least sometime shortly after the initial consultation. So that's information I'd want to be getting to you rather quickly.
Anything else? All right, well, Eric, we appreciate it.
Absolutely. Any other